But it does also make me think that we are not going to get ever a really good deal with Donald Trump.
A very unique website has just made its appearance. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today, we have a private citizen who's put together data from the government showcasing the temporary foreign worker program, the mobility program, which is also temporary foreign worker program, just without the Lima requirements, essentially easier permits, and student visas, all in a nice chart. You can easily see the data. It is staggering. We also got this outrageous clip of Melanie Joly talking to Rosemary Barton on the CBC. Let's jump into this. Starting this one off, holy crap, someone started a website to track how many temporary work permits are being issued in Canada. 3.1 million permits in 2024. So this comes from this website here, immigrationstatistics.com is the website. And there's a lot of information here. So scrolling up to the top, I'll just make it big. So first off here in red, you can see this is the International Mobility Program. The green is study permits and the TFW program is the blue one. So obviously the biggest comes from the International Mobility Program, and adding this together, 3.1 million total. Even if you take out the green one here, the study permits, you're still at 2.1 million people. No wonder Canadians can't find jobs. This is the same chart just shown in a different manner here side by side. The mobility program is off the charts. And then removing the study permits, we have the data shown here, as well as another one showing them side by side here. Scrolling down, we see the mobility permits and TFW permits in the year they became effective, i.e. granted. That's why you're seeing 2025 being lower, because they haven't been granted yet. Now scrolling down, what do we have here compared to origins in Canadian immigration approved temporary residence applications? India versus America, 50,000 versus 3.6 million. This is an interesting one here. You can see approved applications, extensions for Canadian temporary residence per origin country from January 2022 to 25. This is the last 3 years. You're seeing India dominating here, 3.6 million. The next closest is China at 1.1 million, Ukraine 1.1, and then all the rest here. So all the rest of these combined isn't even close to what is coming from people coming from India. This one here is from January 2020 versus 2022. So this is 2 years more. So 5 years total. And we're seeing a lot more people from Ukraine in comparison, going back 2 more years. So this is interesting because you can change the data here, changing the date. So this is already from when Trudeau got in 2015. Now look at the difference here. Temporary foreign worker program dominated by Mexico. This is because we got people coming in to pick fruit. Going back and looking at the data here, the blue is temporary foreign workers. I should note when me or basically anyone else is talking about temporary foreign workers, we're talking about both of these combined. The International Mobility Program is just a different program of working here in Canada. So in comparison, you can see International Mobility Program is dominated by India, where the TFW is dominated by Mexico, but this only makes up like 1/10 of the International Mobility Program. Finally, let's break down citizens versus permanent resident versus study permit holders. That's what we see here, study permit holders per year. This is just the last 5 years. We've got India at 1 million, then China, then Philippines. We've got asylum claimants, top 25 countries. India, 32,000, Bangladesh, Nigeria. There shouldn't be that many from India, hardly at all. We got humanitarian and compassionate work permit holders per country, India, Mexico, Haiti. New Canadian permanent residents by origin country, 600,000 from India, then China, then Philippines. New Canadian citizens by origin country, 260,000 from India. This is just in the past like 2.5 years. Philippines by 130,000, Nigeria, 46,000, Pakistan, Syria, China. This is some really interesting data, and it just goes to show, you can see how much of it is we just scroll all the way up. The biggest piece of info coming from this is this right here, 3.1 million. No wonder Canadians can't find jobs. So jumping over to the CBC, we've got Melanie Joly here, looking like she just ate a day-old burrito, telling us how important the CC topic is. I'm going to start calling it climate change. I think you know what I'm talking about, the C word.
Not looking at Chinese electric vehicles, which right now are subject to 100% tariff, or would that also be considered lowering that tariff?
At this point, the 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs is policy still standing.
So they're not touching that because they don't want cheap Chinese EVs to compete with the local market that essentially gone bankrupt. So we're going to let the canola industry completely crash and burn? That doesn't make any sense.
The auto sector is under extreme pressure. Obviously, that's what you're dealing with. But climate is also under extreme pressure. And I wonder what the
Anytime she says the C word, I'm going to put a duck noise in from now on.
Move to review this policy says about the government's commitment to climate change.
Well, the Minister of the Environment, Joly is working on a new competitiveness strategy. We believe that it is for us in our interest, not only, of course, to fight climate change, which is obvious, but also...
It's obvious. It's just so obvious. It's not like exporting more LNG would produce far more results globally than anything else we could do here in Canada. Canadians recycling, cutting down how many steaks a Canadian eats, or taking the bike to work once in a while. All that stuff doesn't matter in relation to Canada exporting LNG to India and China. They know this. They don't want to admit this. I wish one of the reporters asked Mark Carney this question and specifically give this example, because none of these liberals want to answer this question.
To reap the benefits of an industrial strategy linked to being able to be in clean tech. You know, when you look at the companies that are worldwide leaders in clean tech, many of them are Canadians. Actually, we're in the top 100, and we want to build them even more. And that's why our policy, particularly our pricing, our industrial carbon pricing, is really, really important to make sure that these companies continue to be competitive. So we'll continue to do that while we want to become an energy superpower. You've heard us saying that. That's why major projects are important.
If this strategy was really working, they would collect data on it and prove to us that it's a better business case to have companies positioned around climate change being more eco and green. They don't have this data. They don't collect this data because they know they're full of crap. We'll jump back to that in a second. Let's go to Mark Carney's book, Values. The point is that social movements can move slowly and then with surprising speed. Variously termed social memes, behavioral cascades, moral sediments. These shifts in values can suddenly drive immense change. Governments are responsible for translating this momentum into actionable policies that are set on credible and predictable paths. One way to do this is to put in place frameworks so that every financial decision takes climate change into account. This is Mark Carney's words. This is what he's doing in Canada. He's making every single thing that we do in life will revolve around this. But the biggest actions like exporting LNG to India and China, they don't want to do that because they don't really care about this and solving this problem, if you want to call it that. We're not going to get into the weeds of that, of numerous scientists on both the left and the right debating whether this is even real or not. Let's just say though this is real and this is a problem facing everyone on Earth, then they would do actions like exporting LNG because that has a far bigger impact on the global CO2 levels. Now, they don't do that because they can't make money off of that. Not the money they're looking for. That doesn't give them power over the Canadian people. It's not an easy way to monetize unless they're directly investing and owning all the LNG facilities. And that would only make them money. That doesn't give them control over the Canadian population, such as with EV mandates. That is control over the population. And we've seen so much pushback that Mark Carney's had to pull back on it, but he's going to bring that back at some point.
That's what we'll invest in different types of energies in the context of our C5 major project initiative.
Would that include, though, those projects could include, I suppose, a pipeline, something that may or may not contribute to our fight against climate change?
So we've said we would be supporting conventional energy and also, obviously renewable energy. Our goal is still the same. We have to be net zero by 2050. And we are seeing...
We just have to. Why? Why do we have to? Tell me why. And show me with actual data and proof. You don't have any. That's why I'm calling this out. She's got nothing. The reason why is because Mark Carney has a whole bunch of stocks that are all lined up with net zero, and he's going to make a lot of money off of it. Because he's prime minister, he's calling the shots, and all these liberals without a backbone are lining right up there to stand there right with him.
That, of course, environmental impacts of climate change are being felt. So this is still very top of mind, but we're just being pragmatic. We are dealing with real economic pressures. So that's why this plan is really to deal with our clear, dealing with now what we're doing.
She just said dealing with real economic pressures. That is what the EV mandate was putting on the auto industry. And Mark Carney even admitted that. And then they've released that EV mandate, thus relieving the economic pressures. Why are you guys putting economic pressure, negative pressure on our major industries, hurting Canadian jobs, making life more unaffordable and miserable for Canadians? That is the question. We need need to have laws in the books that protect Canadians against this kind of corruption.
Thinking ahead and really, putting down the foundations for Canada's long-term prosperity by making sure we can build in Canada through our steel. So maybe our ports, maybe our rail, including, a speed rail between Windsor and Quebec City, and making sure that we can build more homes through Canada Homes, which will be the new agency we'll be creating with lumber from Canada, with steel also.
They'll be creating that at some point, 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road. They'll create that. Don't worry.
Yeah.
From Canada. So this is what we need to do.
I understand the attempt to realign things to make sure that Canada is more resilient within our borders. But it does also make me think that we are not going to get ever a really good deal with Donald Trump, with the United States again. Is that sort of what you've come to conclude as well, that this is something that is not going to be negotiated to a satisfactory outcome?
So I think that Canadians understand that there are many things happening in the world we can't control, and we will concentrate on one we can control. At this point, we have 85% of the products being sent to the U.S. that are tariff-free. Now, we need to focus on the strategic sectors: steel, aluminum, auto, lumber, copper. Okay?
No, you need to focus on the whole package, because CUSMA's coming up for renegotiation starting in a month and a half. CUSMA's done July 1st. So this isn't something that's in the distant future. This is something that's happening soon. 3/4 of a year, and Canada's going to be getting whacked with who knows what kind of tariffs. If we don't get this situation sorted out quickly, like an election, and get them the heck out of government quickly, Canada is going to be in very bad shape, because we're only feeling an economic squash of 15% of our economy. If we feel the American boot of the entire economy pushing down on us, it's going to be game over around here.
And there have been threats against other sectors. Yeah. So rather than going industry specific, we're going through a comprehensive package, which is dealing with all industries to deal with not only the sectors affected, but the threat of unpredictability that is making capital allergic to investment. This is now
Capital is allergic in Canada right now. It's literally fleeing out the door and down to America because all of these regulations and policies are driving it down south. No business wants to do business here because it sucks. That's the Coles Notes of it. It sucks to do business in Canada right now.
Difficult time because of the rupture I was telling you about, the fact that international trade will never be the same. This is a time where there is a real transformation in our economy. And if we're not smart and acting fast, it will really have an impact on Canadians and our livelihoods. So that's why there's a sense of urgency, and that's why the government is acting.
The government isn't acting. There's no urgency. It's been 6 months. You guys have literally done nothing. What are you talking about? Moneybags here doesn't have any real problems. There's Canadians with real problems in this country, like not being able to afford food and their rent. There's no urgency here. You don't know what urgency is. When you see your bank account and there's no money in there. These people are so detached from reality. How do they even count net zero to claim we will reach it by 2050? We are already net zero. Our land, waters, vegetation absorb roughly double our CO2 human activity emits in Canada. I've already showed this on a video. It does depend. Some years we have more CO2 and some years we absorb more CO2 based on how many forest fires. When it comes down to it, we know there's going to be forest fires every year, and right now there's some bad ones. We have enough money to buy water bombers to put all of them out, but right now the Liberals are sending all that money we should be spending on water bombers and sending them off to all their pet projects around the world that have no financial audits. So really, if we had an army of water bombers, we could put out all those fires. We would be net zero, net negative every single year. But that's not really their goal. They don't really care about that. They're just using this as a green grift to make money off of it. Mark Carney's loaded to the gills with millions of dollars of stocks and all this crap. I mean, let's go back to Mark Carney's book here. So he's got some conditions here, the smaller text. Just to set it up here, it says, over the last 10 years, these effects have helped reduce the cost onshore wind, solar, photovoltaics, and batteries 60, 90, 85% respectively. Public policy must use levers to unleash further progress in these and in a widening set of other technologies. These levers include a clear carbon price path for the next decade to create investor certainty that high carbon technologies will be uneconomic and that low carbon will be increasingly profitable. That is not what's happening right now. It's less profitable and more expensive. Regulation to spur specific transitions. This is what Mark Carney's trying to do right now. It says, for instance, raising minimum fuel efficiency standards, aka the clean fuel standards we have in Canada Canada right now, where they've added on essentially a carbon tax onto our fuel, which is different from the carbon tax. It's another carbon tax on our fuel to try to phase out people from driving cars, and says, and commitments to phase out all internal combustion engine ICE passenger vehicle sales, spur companies to accelerate investments in electric engines and batteries, and investors to support the auto companies which have the most ambitious electrification strategies. They've tried this and all those companies went bankrupt. There's very few of them left. Some of them sold off some of their assets, some of them moved business somewhere else. Some of them are limping along. Most of them are gone, along with tens of billions of dollars of Canadian taxpayer money. Private investment in sustainable aviation fuel would be encouraged by carbon price and regulatory mandate for rising percentage of jet fuel from zero carbon sources. And guess who owns stocks in green jet fuel? It's Mark Carney with Infinium. Of course he does. This is all a green grift so he can make more money. They're greedy bankers. Mark Carney's a greedy banker. While Canadians are struggling to meet ends meet, well, what does Mark Carney spend his time doing? He ran a marathon yesterday. Congrats, Carney. Apparently finished 58th out of 120 runners in a 26-kilometer race. Good for you. Canadians still can't afford food. Okay, I got sidetracked here, but yeah, Infinium green jet fuel. We all saw this clip from before. It's a great opportunity. We put $1 billion to work. It was a great opportunity. They pushed their policy on the British government, and then they had to include green jet fuel in all their flights. At least there are a couple airlines. And then they get rich off of it. Just greedy bankers. Remember this clip from a couple of months ago?
As our businesses, as our big industry decarbonize, we don't want foreign steel coming here that's high carbon, right? From Asia, from America. So we will have a carbon border adjustment mechanism that prevents that from happening and puts them in a stronger position. So that's the second. And then
that does not put them in a stronger position. It puts his bank account in a stronger position. So for anyone not aware what he just said, CBAM is the carbon border adjustment mechanism. As we see with this example here from Everwind Fuels, this is the green hydrogen scam where they convert energy from wind through electrolysis. They heat it, they cool it, they turn it into ammonia, and then they ship that ammonia, which is then 20% efficient of the total energy, into a ship and then send that over to Germany and sell it to them. Anyways, if we were to create that green hydrogen in Canada, but then we were to import green hydrogen, say someone else was creating it and we wanted to bring it in, but they didn't do it as green, as eco as us with windmills, then Mark Carney, what he's talking about is putting on a carbon border adjustment to make it equal. To give a simpler example, say if we had I-beams and say they cost $10,000 a piece, I don't know what they cost, and say if they're made in Canada, they cost $10,000 a piece, but if you were to import them from Africa, where they don't use the same green energy to produce them, then when they get imported at $10,000 a piece, they'd be hit with a CBAM surcharge. Essentially, it's a tariff wrapped in the cloak of environment policy. So it might be $2,000. So that I-beam would cost a construction company importing it $12,000 because they didn't use windmills or solar panels or whatever else for the energy to create that I-beam in Africa. So that's what Mark Carney wants to do, essentially tariff everything coming into Canada that doesn't meet up to his green standards. That's just going to increase the cost of living on everything in Canada and force Canadians to only buy stuff that is super eco and green essentially in Canada. And who's already producing that stuff right now? We know who. We know which company it is, especially with it all laid out here. It's quite obvious what's going on, Carney.
And the third aspect is we have this carbon market that's in place, and we have an opportunity so that the large polluters on the marginal reductions that they make, that they can pay for people's climate smart choices. It will end up being a more efficient market for them. The government will stand in the middle and make sure that people have clear incentives. And if we are elected, we will put this in place.
So that was just before the election, if elected. His plan here will make life unaffordable in Canada, period. We got Ryan Gerritsen posting this here. So carbon border adjustment mechanism. Yeah, he's got it on the books here. So it's slated for 2027, 28, 2028, 29. So if Carney stays in power for a couple of years, game over in Canada. I should note too, I have a whole bunch of information on my CBAM video, which you can watch off of my chart. My chart will be released very soon here. A bunch of people asking. The CBAM system is already being used in the EU and it's a disaster. Just like everything else Carney has implemented in the EU. Remember when this economic genius thought we didn't need steel anymore?